70,000 years ago, a catastrophic climate shift turned the once lush African homeland of our ancestors into an unforgiving desert, forcing a desperate band of early humans to attempt the impossible, crossing into unknown lands with nothing but their wits and primitive tools. Their journey would become humanity's greatest gamble, an epic migration that shaped our very DNA and led to the colonization of an entire planet. What would you have done if faced with the same impossible choice? Certain death in your homeland, or risking everything to venture into the complete unknown? The sun burned mercilessly overhead as Asha squinted across the endless sand. She licked her cracked lips, wincing at the sting. Just 70,000 years ago, this barren wasteland had been her people's paradise. Now it stretched before her like a death sentence. Asha's throat felt like fire as she swallowed. 3 days without proper water. The small skin bag at her side held barely enough for one more day. Behind her, in the shadow of tall rocks, 20 people huddled together, all that remained of her once thriving clan. Her eyes found little Cato, just 5 summers old, his belly swollen from hunger, his eyes dull with thirst. Last moon they had buried his sister, along with 2 other children who couldn't survive as the land dried up around them. She turned back toward the horizon, remembering stories from the elders. They spoke of a time when great lakes filled this land, when fish leaped from blue waters, and green grass grew taller than a child. Herds of animals had roamed freely then, providing meat, hides, and bones for tools. The old ones said the rains came regularly, filling gourds and washing bodies clean. It seemed like a dream now, a tale too wonderful to believe. "Asha, come, the sun will kill you," her mother called weakly from the shade. Asha didn't move. Something pulled her gaze northward. The elders had whispered of green lands beyond the great desert, places where water still flowed. No one from their clan had ever traveled so far. The journey would be deadly, but staying meant certain death for them all. She watched a dust devil spin across the baked earth, 3 children lost in one moon cycle. How many more would die if they stayed? The last water hole had dried up completely 2 days ago. The roots and berries they depended on had shriveled and disappeared. Even the insects that once crawled everywhere were gone. Asha fingered the stone tool hanging from her waist. It had belonged to her father, who had not returned from hunting 5 suns ago. With food so scarce, hunters traveled farther each day, risking everything to bring back even small game. Many never returned. A cool breeze suddenly touched her face, unusual in this scorching heat. It seemed to beckon her northward. Asha closed her eyes and breathed in deeply, making her decision. When she returned to the rocky shelter, her family saw the change in her eyes. "We must leave," she told them, simply pointing north. "Our home is dying, but we are not dead yet." Fear flashed across tired faces. No one had ever journeyed beyond the lands they knew. What monsters might lurk beyond? What dangers waited in unknown territories? "How will we find water?" her uncle asked, his voice rough with thirst. "How will we not die here?" Asha countered. Silence fell as the truth of her words sank in. One by one, heads nodded slowly. They would leave at nightfall, traveling under the cooler light of the moon. This desperate decision marked the beginning of humanity's greatest journey, a migration that would ultimately lead humans to every corner of the planet. As the clan gathered what little they possessed, none of them knew they were about to gamble everything on a journey that would change the course of human history forever. 1,000 years before Asha's desperate choice, her ancestors lived in a green world that seemed to have no end. The earth wobbled slightly on its path around the sun, creating what we now call a wet time across northern Africa. This tiny change made all the difference. Rain fell from the sky in sheets, feeding lakes so vast you could not see their other shores. Rivers cut through the land like blue snakes, connecting these waters in a web that gave life to everything. Standing on a hill back then, you would hear hundreds of birds calling to each other, their songs mixing with the gentle splash of fish jumping from the water. The air smelled sweet and rich, filled with the scent of growing things and moist earth. Women gathered in groups each morning, laughing as they dug for tasty roots with long sticks they had sharpened on rocks. The ground felt cool and damp between their toes. Children played nearby, their bellies full, their skin shining with health. When hunters returned, everyone would feast on meat from the many animals that grazed on endless fields of tall grass. No one went hungry. No one suffered from thirst. The world provided everything they needed. But then, little by little, things began to change. Each year the rains came later and left earlier. At first, people hardly noticed. A small pond dried up. A patch of grass turned yellow and did not grow back. Hunters had to walk a bit farther to find animals. But soon, the changes became impossible to ignore. Lakes that had been there for generations began to shrink. First at their edges, leaving rings of mud that hardened in the sun, then more dramatically, until some disappeared completely, leaving nothing but cracked dirt and white bones where fish had once swum. The grass that had fed countless animals withered and died. Children began to cry at night, their stomachs empty. Parents looked at each other with worry in their eyes, not knowing what to tell them. The land that had always provided was failing them. As water became harder to find, fighting broke out between groups who had once shared peacefully. People who had been friends became enemies as they struggled over the last good water holes. Blood was spilled over puddles that would have been ignored in better times. The big sky that had brought life-giving rain now seemed cruel, endlessly blue and empty of clouds. The sun that had once made plants grow now baked the earth until it cracked. The world that had been so kind was turning against Asha's people with each passing season. What had been paradise was becoming a trap. A deadly desert was being born where a garden had once thrived. Yet even as the land dried and died, nature offered one small chance. The same shift in the earth's movement that took away the rains created something new, a narrow strip of green land stretching northeast, through what we now call Egypt and into new territories. Like a bridge made of grass and scattered water holes, it appeared just when people needed it most. This thin path led away from the dying homeland toward places no one had ever seen. The choice was clear but terrible. Stay and face certain death as the desert claimed everything, or leave everything familiar behind and walk into the unknown. For Asha's small group, the gamble of leaving seemed better than the sure death of staying. What waited beyond that green path no human could say. Asha's clan became the front runners in humanity's greatest journey. They moved slowly along the narrow green path, following the tracks of animals that knew where water could be found. Each new place they entered looked different from the last. They learned to watch the birds flying overhead. Where birds went, water might be found. They followed the paths trampled by thirsty animals. When they found water, they would camp nearby for days, building up their strength before moving on. As they traveled into new lands, they had to make new tools. The stones here were different from those in their homeland. Some broke too easily, while others were too hard to shape. They learned which wood made the best spears for hunting the strange animals they encountered. Asha's cousin, a skilled toolmaker, crafted different points for different prey. Lighter, sharper ones for fast-running animals, heavier ones for larger beasts. The women discovered new plants and carefully taught each other which were good to eat and which caused stomach pains or worse. Their words changed too. They needed new sounds for the things they had never seen before. The white cold that sometimes covered the ground in the morning, the tall trees that grew so thick they blocked the sun, the stinging rain that sometimes fell from dark clouds. Each new sight and feeling needed a name. One day, as Asha's nephew hunted near a rocky hillside, he came face to face with a strange being. It looked almost human, but had a heavy brow over its eyes, a nose that jutted outward, and arms that rippled with strength. He ran back to camp, eyes wide with fear. The clan gathered their weapons, preparing to fight these strange creatures if needed. But when they met again, something unexpected happened. Instead of fighting, they watched each other cautiously. Days passed. They began to trade, meat for tools, skins for stone. Sometimes they even shared meals by fire. These beings were Neanderthals, humans but different from Asha's people. And sometimes, rarely, they became more than just neighbors. A few from Asha's clan found mates among these strangers. Their children carried something from both parents, new strengths that would later help humans live in colder places. This mixing of blood was a gift that no one understood at the time, but it would help humans spread even farther across the earth. As seasons passed, Asha's clan grew. Not all stayed together. Some wanted to follow the shoreline, where they learned to dig for shellfish and float on simple rafts made from tied logs. Others preferred to move inland, following rivers into forests and valleys. Each group faced different challenges and found different solutions. Those who went toward colder lands learned to sew animal hides into warm coverings for their bodies. They watched how furry animals survived the cold and copied their ways. Those who followed the coasts learned to read the movement of tides and find food in shallow waters. They built better boats over time, venturing farther from shore with each generation. What had started as a desperate escape was changing into something else, a purposeful spreading out across new lands. With every challenge they overcame, humans became more clever, more adaptable. They shared their knowledge through stories told around fires, through songs that could be remembered and passed down, and through marks made on stone, bone, and wood. These simple beginnings would grow into the great human skills of art, writing, and teaching. The journey that began with fear was becoming a story of triumph, a testament to human ability to change and survive against all odds. 50,000 years after Asha's brave decision, her descendants had achieved what would have seemed impossible. Some had reached a huge island we now call Australia. They crossed wide stretches of open water on boats made of wood and animal skin, guided only by stars and birds. The children of Asha's people had become sailors without even knowing that word, finding their way across waters no human had ever crossed before. By 45,000 years ago, humans had settled throughout Europe, making homes in caves and shelters built from animal bones and skins. They painted beautiful pictures of animals on cave walls, red handprints, galloping horses, mighty bison. These paintings still exist today. Silent messages from our ancestors telling us, "We were here. We saw these animals. We made beauty even in hard times." By 15,000 years ago, humans had walked across a land bridge into a whole new world, the Americas. From the frozen north to the warm south, one kind of being, humans born in Africa, now lived in almost every place on Earth where life was possible. The desperate journey that began with Asha's small clan had led to the spread of humans across the entire planet. Today, the blood of those ancient travelers runs in all our veins. If you could look inside your body at the tiny building blocks of life called DNA, you would find the story of that great journey written there. Scientists can trace the paths our ancestors took by studying these tiny messages passed down through thousands of generations. We all carry this history within us, a record of human courage written in the language of life itself. When you touch your own skin, you're touching the same kind of body that carried Asha across that first desert. When you use your clever hands to make or fix something, you are using the same human gift for tool making that helped our ancestors survive in strange new lands. When you speak, you use the same gift of language that helped early humans share knowledge about which plants were safe to eat and which animals were dangerous. As you lay in your bed tonight, warm and safe, imagine Asha standing at the edge of a dying homeland, looking out at the unknown. Feel the hot wind on your face as it once touched hers. Though you sleep in comfort she never knew, her courage lives on in your body. The same spirit that drove her forward continues to push us toward new places, deep into ocean depths we've never seen, high onto mountaintops, and even now toward other planets. We remain, at our heart, a family of travelers. When astronauts first stepped on the moon, they were following the same human path that began when Asha's feet first stepped out of Africa. When scientists work to solve big problems like climate change, they use the same human cleverness that helped our ancestors figure out how to survive in ice and desert and jungle and plain. That first, brave walk away from home has never really ended. We keep moving, keep learning, keep adapting. The story that began 70,000 years ago continues through you, through all of us. As you drift toward sleep, remember that you are part of this great human journey. The ancient courage of those first travelers beats in your heart still, connecting you to the greatest migration story ever told. The story of how one species, born in Africa, found a way to call an entire planet home.